So I'm Catherine Kennedy. I'm a partner specialising in property development here at Forbes. I've got experience of all aspects of development and property work, so whether for urban regeneration bodies, NHS bodies, investment clients, retail sector, education and social housing bodies. So I currently lead the development sub-team at Forbes within the housing and regeneration property team. We aim to provide a complete service to social housing clients, so in particular registered providers and local authorities. I also lead the Forbes Housing Group, which covers the full range of specialist lawyers who focus on all things housing and public sector, and together we provide a complete legal service to social housing clients.
Hi, my name's Adam Bromley. I'm a partner at Forbes Listers and the head of the property teams, focusing primarily on our commercial, residential and litigation offerings.
In the run-up to this election, uppermost in everybody's mind, I think, is the general housing crisis, really.
I think it's safe to say that we have a housing crisis at the moment. I've heard it called a housing catastrophe, I've heard it called a number of things.
There are 1.3 million households waiting for a social home, it's currently calculated, and that has gone up 161,000 in the last 5 years. And JLL have calculated that it would take £205 billion of funding to clear that in the next Parliament. Given the lack of capital funding around, clearly alternatives are going to have to be looked at. Currently, local authorities are spending a combined £1.7 billion a year putting up people in temporary accommodation. So those costs are really quite startling. And the other thing is that many councils have actually closed their housing waiting lists.
So it's no surprise that housing takes up a large amount of space in all of the manifestos that all the parties have released. The scale and number of the issues that are presenting itself loom really large, but it's also a large opportunity for all of the parties to really gain voters by nailing any issues to solve the housing crisis. The major things that are being mentioned in the manifestos is talking about greenbelt development, talking about brownfield development.
Most of the main parties have issued quite ambitious house building targets for the next 5 years in their manifestos. I think it's fair to say that there has been a big struggle in recent times to actually meet those housing targets which have been in place previously. Conservatives generally focused on home buying and the Help to Buy scheme, making that permanent, bringing it back and making it permanent, which would mean that first-time buyers can access up to 20% of the value of the property as an equity loan, so like an additional gap funding where they mightn't either have enough saved up for a large deposit or they're not available for them on the lending market. Labour more focusing on tenants reforms, so the immediate removal of the no-fault eviction, and also looking at some sort of rent intervention into the private landlord market, where trying to come away from the bidding wars that there are often for people trying to take on private tenancies, where there's almost a bidding war for who's going to pay the most rent and secure the property, so they're looking at intervening in some way. The other thing that's come through since it's been called for by Andy Burnham is some sort of suspension or alteration of the right to buy market. So obviously that does result in an overall loss of housing stock when that's exercised. So across the Greens, Lib Dems and Labour, there's certainly willingness to look at that now, and maybe some alterations will come through there.
There are a number of issues that particularly are presented and that link into the housing crisis, linked into home ownership, linked into the private rented sectors. The biggest amount of space that's taken up is around house building. There are some key issues that have been released in the manifestos around home ownership and and particularly in the Conservative and Labour manifestos, there are mentions in there as to things that can be done around mortgage guarantees, around a new Help to Buy system, the hold-ups in the system, the amount of planning consents being refused, and the problems around where we actually do build the houses. There's a number of proposals made across all the manifestos. I think one of the most important things to really look at is the planning system, which really is kind of halting the house building process. There are predictions in the market that at the moment we're going to see a drop to more around 160,000 homes a year being built, and the peak in 2019 and 2020 was more around 220,000 homes being built. So we can see a gap between the numbers that the parties are promising in the manifestos and the numbers in reality. Safe to say that one of the biggest issues is the planning system at the moment, and it is something that needs to be resolved.
Yeah, my advice at this stage is really to watch this space.
So the biggest thing to really look at is, well, what needs to be done to deliver that house building? What are the parties actually talking about? That's really important in relation to what the political parties deliver through those manifestos, and whichever government is in situ post the 4th of July, the real important thing is going to be what is delivered to produce the number of houses that need to be built. The numbers that are being mentioned are necessary.
Given the scale of the problem, there is going to need to be a multiple approach really, so retrofitting, bringing some empty houses back into use, but undoubtedly a multiplicity of approaches is going to be needed to make any significant dent in the size of the housing crisis we are currently facing.
We need more than just words and numbers. We need substantial policy change around the planning system to really unlock this, and coupled together with that, we also need to look at the financial viability of the houses being built. We need to look at how the finances can be delivered. We need to look at how we can incentivise landowners in relation to allowing this development to take place. We need to look at public sector building as against private sector building. At Forbes, we are particularly keeping up to date with the developments that are happening from now until the general election, and most importantly, after the general election, whichever government is in situ, it's going to be very important for us to be aware of what is happening, what developments are taking place. And at Forbes, we do have specialists in all housing needs to be able to help people with whatever help will be required.